Good evening, everybody, and good morning to those joining us from the US, and up to anybody attending from Yorkshire. Welcome to the 5th Buy Nowt event from organised by Bradford Anti-Poverty Events Group. We've got over 200 people registered for tonight's webinar, and so it's great to see so many people from all over the world joining us today. My name's Gareth Evans. I'm going to be taking us through and guiding us through today's event. And we've got some amazing speakers, so we'll be introducing them in a second. But forgive the rather parochial quip at the start, but I'm actually from Yorkshire and often live up to the stereotype of being rather frugal with my money. So it's been an amazing pleasure to see how the Buy Now campaign's evolved over the years into this international event we've got tonight. So thanks to ABCUL for hosting the session. And just a bit of housekeeping, please keep yourself muted at all times. But we would love to invite your questions and any examples that you've got of best practice to add that to the web chat. And so we're going to kick off tonight's session. We've got Dr. Julia Paul from BBC Radio 4 and Deborah, oh, excuse me, we've just been joined by Councillor Susan Hinchcliffe, who is leader of Bradford Council and is actually going to introduce today's event. So welcome, Susan, and would you like to kick us off? Okay, well, while we wait for that to happen, let me introduce back to Dr. Julia Paul from BBC Radio 4 and Deborah Collett, Manager of Artworks Creative Communities and one of the inventors of the Buy Now campaign back in 2016. Over to you, and you're going to talk us through Black Friday and Buy Now.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, I'm delighted to be here to take part in Buy Now, and I think we can probably all agree that this is a much better way of spending time online than shopping. So I'm grateful to the organisers for allowing me to be involved as well. As Gareth says, my name's Julia Paul. I'm a journalist and an academic, and I report and present for the BBC. And one of the main reasons I've developed such a good working relationship with the Bradford Credit Union and Artworks Creative Communities is that I spend a lot of my time these days reporting for the consumer programme, You and Yours, on BBC Radio 4 here in the UK. And that programme, as the title suggests, is really about issues that affect your family, and debt, fraud, issues of poverty and consumer buying are always very high on the agenda. So since the 1980s, the Buy Now, Pay Later slogan has encouraged millions of people to buy things they don't need and to spend money that they don't really have. In the UK in the last decade, credit card debt per household has risen by nearly 9%. At the start of this year, the average UK household had £2,592 owing on their credit card. And of course, with an average representative rate on those credit cards of more than 20%, that ensures that those debts keep on growing. Now, one of the few positive impacts of the coronavirus pandemic is that some people have actually been able to start paying off some of that debt. So in the spring, according to the Bank of England, UK consumers collectively reduced their credit card debt by £5 billion, while outstanding balances on loans fell by around £2.4 billion. But much more worryingly, for millions of people, the impact of the pandemic has actually been to push them into debt. So according to the UK consumer help organisation, Citizens Advice, 6 million UK adults have fallen behind on at least one household bill. But our Western economies depend on people buying things, and traditionally festivals and holidays have always been used to boost that buying, even if that does mean consumers borrowing more. And of course, that's where Black Friday comes in. As we know, the sales weekend starts tomorrow, but you'll have seen adverts and things trying to entice you to spend over the last few days. Now, there are numerous stories as to where Black Friday got its name, and I'll take any challenges from anybody on the panel or in the audience who knows of a different one.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to communicate with Jackie.
The most basic story suggests that in the days when American shops recorded their accounting details by hand, profits were written in black and losses in red. And so while many shops spent most of the year in the red, when they went into the black was that day after the Thanksgiving sales. However, it wasn't really until the 1950s that the phrase Black Friday became linked with the post-Thanksgiving period, and it's claimed it was police officers in Philadelphia who did that. At the time, the city hosted a big Army-Navy football game the day after Thanksgiving, and this brought in crowds of tourists and shoppers to the city, and this would cause chaos, traffic jams, shoplifting sprees, pickpockets, which meant that the city's cops had to work very long hours, very long shifts, and no one was allowed to take the day off. So for them, it really was a Black Friday. Now, of course, looking in terms of what Black Friday tries to entice us to do, bargains, it doesn't just mean going to a physical store. It's obviously a lot more focused online. And in fact, it was Amazon who first introduced Black Friday to the UK in 2010. But the increase in demand that sales day has created, both in shops and online, means some retailers have started to extend that sales period, as I've said, beyond the traditional 24 hours. And you'll have seen that particularly this year when so many places have actually got restrictions on physical shops being open. And there've been promotions offered over the last few days, and some people are now calling it Black 5 Day. And in this year, in the UK, particularly this year, at the moment, non-essential shops are closed until December the 2nd. And so most of any Black Friday events that are happening online. We know that many people do use the sale to start their Christmas shopping, but often they can forget what they can afford. Or they don't check that what they're buying is genuinely reduced. And we also know that there's a much greater rate of people being persuaded to buy stuff they don't like when it's online, particularly people with mental health issues. We also know that Black Friday has actually been associated with violence in shops, with people literally fighting over goods. But despite that, millions of consumers in the UK and the US spend billions on Black Friday. Last year, between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. on the day, Barclaycard recorded a new peak of 1,184 transactions per second. That's just astonishing when you think about it. And that was up by around 9% from the previous year. In the US, consumers spent $7.4 billion online last year. However, as we know, as we are all gathered here together, there are people who just don't participate in this. Environmentalists point to overconsumption as one of the main ways that we're damaging the planet. And that was the thinking behind Buy Nothing Day. This was founded in Vancouver in Canada in 1992 by artist Ted Dave, and it's celebrated on the day after American Thanksgiving. Well, now 65 nations take part, and in 2016, Artworks Creative Communities, a Bradford-based participatory arts organisation, held its own version, Buy Nowt Day, the first time that happened, a very Yorkshire twist on that Buy Nothing Day. So as Gareth suggested before, delighted to ask Deb Collett, who's the project coordinator for Artworks Creative Communities, to tell us a little bit more about all of that and how it started. So Deb, can I just ask you first of all then, how did the idea for Buy Nowt Day actually come about?
In Bradford. And so we were really aware that there were so many people that were excluded, if you like, from this sort of cornucopia of buying opportunities simply through poverty. We were also aware of the global movement and an increasing awareness of the finite nature of the resources of our planet, and that actually, particularly with its emphasis on, Amazon overpackaging, electrical goods, that it was a really significant contributor to the destruction of the planet. And thirdly, we're a participatory arts organisation, and we wanted to create a positive alternative space where people could explore the idea and celebrate the fact that as human beings, our worth should not be measured solely in our capacity to spend.
Thank you, Deb. Can you tell us then, how normally do you celebrate Buy Nowt Day? What's on offer?
Well, it has grown, and originally it was conceived as a way of offering people an opportunity to perhaps try and develop new skills, to gain confidence in working together, in creating something like with the children or, you know, with other members of friends. We do things like, originally, we created beautifully produced cheques that were about paying the bearer something that recognised what their value was to the giver, rather than a simple financial transaction. We had a sort of little grotto where you could enjoy, if you like, divesting yourself of the guilt and responsibility of what you perhaps might have spent that day inadvertently. We also had, right from the very start, recognised that for many people the financial strain was intolerable, and so we invited other organisations like Fair Share, like Free Cycle, ways of making your money go further through exchange, and that also chimed in with the let's be wary about the over-consumerism. And of course, that's where we first joined up with the inestimable Bradford District Credit Union, who came along, and it offered people sort of in a very, very informal and kindly way, financial advice and of course access to the credit union.
Now, Deb, in the run-up to Christmas, people are going to shop. Have you ever been accused of being a bit of a party pooper?
Well, funnily enough, I have, and it's a badge I wear quite proudly. You know, because the Black Friday party is a pretty exclusive party, and you know, it's not. It's getting people to spend. But as I understand it, it's not necessarily doing, you know, small local businesses a great big favour. You know, they're really struggling. And I think perhaps if people are, you know, they should give themselves a rest, perhaps on Black Friday, and don't spend anything at all. There's plenty of other days in the year to spend. And if you are in that sort of under that Christmas pressure, it's perhaps good to make a bit of an effort to look around locally and support local businesses and local ventures, so that that money that we are spending, you know, is of some benefit to the area, rather than just, you know, the big guns.
So, Deb, if people want to set up their own Buy Nowt Day, what can they do?
Well, I think, you know, almost anything. If you look on the sort of the buy nothing spectrum, I mean, people, I think somewhere on the west coast of America, there's a sort of kayaking event every year. I think, you know, go for a bike ride, do something different. Don't, because if you stay at home and just wait for, you know, the endless pinging on your phone and your emails, all you're going to be getting is these grotesque offers to buy things that you don't really need. So I would say, you know, celebrate it by, you know, repurposing something, getting together if you can, in a safe way, of course, these days. But just do something else and enjoy what you've got. And be thankful for, you know, community and friendship.
Deb Collett, Project Coordinator for Artworks Creative Communities, thanks so much for explaining all that to us. So hopefully now you have a little bit more information about where Black Friday came from and the ways that you can opt in or opt out, not to take part. I'll be back at the end of the seminar joining some of the other speakers on a panel to answer any questions you may have. But for now, I'll hand back to Gareth. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you both, Julia and Debs. That's a great way to kick us off. And what we'll do is go back, if that's okay, just to Councillor Susan Hinchcliffe, who can also welcome and us into the tonight's session. So over to you, Susan.
So thank you very much. A bit of challenges with the technology. First of all, welcome to American US visitors with us today, which is fantastic. One of the very few benefits of Zoom calls is that you can actually Zoom with people all over the world now, can't you? You don't have to trek across the globe for a meeting. So it's wonderful to have international visitors with us, and obviously happy Thanksgiving as well. So just obviously to frame this a little bit, we're obviously living through a very difficult time at the moment with COVID, and it has hit a lot of people really hard. We had health inequalities before. Those have just been accentuated and exacerbated now. We have people losing their jobs, businesses are going to the wall. So things are really, really difficult out there for people. And therefore, Bradford's always been good at knowing the value of money. We spend it wisely and well. We make sure every penny goes a long way. We do have a lot of people who are on low pay, and therefore they're good at managing a budget. Never has this been more needed than this year, of course, as we're in very difficult times economically as a country, as well as from a pandemic. And that's the reason that we've, as a council, been so supportive of the work of this group and the credit union, of course, and the 8 people on the events group around the anti-poverty campaign, is because it's a real voice, avenue and a means of activity of supporting people to enjoy everything they can in life and to feel supported and have that solidarity as they go through. And that's why the credit union is such an important partner for us, actually. And I see Ian there, who's done huge amounts of work in the district. And we're putting another, in our budget proposals this week, we've just said we're going to put another £50,000 into the credit union as a council, because even in these, especially actually in these straitened times, we need to support people to be able to get easy access to credit. And the low-cost loans and the campaigns around anti-loan sharks is really, really valuable, and we have to anticipate what might happen next, don't we? So really important there. And of course, the social value procurement that we do as a council also tries to help with that, you know, our own purse strings. Can we spend locally in those local organisations and local businesses to make sure we make that Bradford pound go a lot further as well? And that means we've been able to spend another £23 million in the region this year. So all that is really important. But I think the work that you do as by Nowt Day is obviously particularly very Yorkshire, but tackling poverty and financial exclusion as a result of that, it's just one tool, isn't it, amongst everything you do. And I want to thank you for all the work that you do as those 8 organisations with obviously Artworks, Creative Communities, People Can, Bernardo's, CNET, Carers Resources, and of course Stronger Families, as well as the credit union and the council. So a really great initiative and very different this year, but all the more needed this year. So thank you for coming together to invent it again in a different format. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those welcome introductions. So I'm going to quickly pass us over to Ian to introduce this next section on tackling financial inequality. So over to you, Ian.
Excellent. Hello there. Hi. Thank you for everyone who's with us today from wherever you are. It's a fantastic opportunity to meet you all and to share some best practice. I'm going to be slightly looking over at my notes, so please bear with me while I do that. I'm going to put up on screen a quick presentation that I think Jackie's going to be able to do for us. I'm going to make introductions just after this for Scott and Sacha, who will be joining me. Next slide, please. When I first talk about the credit union, I talk about fences and ambulances. When you think of financial help for people. There's a financial cliff in people's lives when they come to the end of the money that they have. And the government and lots of other organisations invest a lot in ambulances at the bottom of the financial cliff. People that take them away to Christians Against Poverty, CAB, other organisations to help them with debt. What credit unions do is put a barrier at the top. We build fences at the top of that financial cliff, and we do that through encouraging people to get into the savings habit, and we also do that by encouraging people, if they need to take low-cost loans where they don't have to go elsewhere for high-cost lending. So the Bradford District Credit Union was actually set up by Bradford Council in 1993. John Major was in power and there was a major recession and staff were not able to get loans. So the council of the day decided to set up a credit union, which is an opportunity for people to save together and then borrow out of that same pot. And until about 2015, we then became an early adopter of internet banking, and then we saw people really start to take notice and start to join the credit union. At the same time, the council decided to fund a financial inclusion officer, that's my role, and to meet the financial inclusion targets of the council, and also to interact and provide education out in the community. 2019, we increased our common bond, the area we were allowed to operate in by the government, into Cllr and Craven. But it's the membership growth that's really had a lot, demonstrates a lot of the work that we did, because we started partnership working from 2016 onwards. And that is up until 2015, we had 3,000 members. And now up until 2020, we've just passed 8,000 members, something we're extremely proud of. At this point in the real world, I would be asking people, 8,000 people, how much do they save together? Because I can't ask you, I'm going to tell you the average answer is anywhere between 100,000 and £1 million. That's usually where people pitch, because they have no idea, of course. I'm here to tell you that actually Bradford District Credit Union has £6 million of savings, member savings, in our accounts. And those are people that pool their money together. And that is how effective a credit union is helping people to save. And we're not alone in that. Every credit union will tell you that we hold a lot of money for the amount of people that we have. One of the things that I like to do out in the community is our free financial workshops. We call it Money SOS. The council had actually asked us to set up COVID Money SOS, and we've seen over 200 community practitioners over lockdown helping them to communicate to people about that. So we look at things like APR, payday lenders, loan sharks, contactless, overdrafts, and credit score. I'm just going to pick out one thing there just to start with, which is APR, annual percentage rate. Everybody's pretty familiar with what that is. Most banks lend anywhere between 6 and 20% based on your credit rating, but it's estimated that 60% of the UK adult population can't get those rates because of their credit score. And that means they need to go somewhere else. And one of the cheapest options here is an organisation in Bradford, a doorstep lender who I won't mention at the moment in their name, but they start at 272% APR. On a £500 loan, that's £410 worth of interest on just £500 over 1 year. And we've been seeing in our communities lockdown loans being offered by flyers at 500%. Take payday lenders, they're anywhere between 1,000, 4,000%. 4,000%, you're paying £40 for every £1 you borrowed. So that gives you an idea of the other things that we like to help people to understand. So the other thing that credit unions do is interact with payroll companies. And a major part of our people, about 3,500, save through their payroll. This is very important for credit unions because these are the people that save a lot. They save regularly, and if they borrow, they very seldom default. So it creates a strong and stable side of the credit union. And the more credit unions have on that side, the more lending they can do to people that are from a financially excluded background. So in the last 5 years, we've gone from 0 to about 2,500 people that are from a financially excluded background, couldn't get a bank account anywhere else, couldn't get cheap credit anywhere else. So we're very grateful for our 33 companies that we operate with. And finally, I'm not going to steal Helen's thunder later on, but the Anti-Poverty Events Group that Helen and I set up and work with 8 organisations, we couldn't do what we do without these organisations. I, as a lone financial inclusion officer covering a huge district of 1.5 million people with the 3 districts, couldn't do what I do if I was just alone. But working with 8 fantastic organisations that are grafters, they work together, we work together, we put something on, we get creative ideas. I'm just very good at putting structure around ideas, and then we put it out to make an event out of that. Events that have been on national TV, that have impacted thousands of people, and we're very excited to do that. So thank you. If you could take that down, and I am going to be going on to introducing my 2 speakers today, and that's going to be Scott Butterfield and Sacha Romanovitch, and I am going to just give you a brief introduction about them. So Scott from the USA, well, Scott and I go way back. We met on LinkedIn for about 3.5 years ago, something like that. Where Scott had put on that financial inclusion is the most important thing your credit union can do. It's in our DNA. And I texted him back and said, wow, we need to talk. And we've been talking about that ever since. We have been collaborating since. Now, Scott used to be part of a credit union, left and set up on his own. He actually looks after 220 credit unions across the USA. If there's a man who knows what he's talking about, it's our Scott. So I want to thank him for being part of Thanksgiving today, and I need to bring him on in just for a moment. Whereas Sacha, a wonderful lady who I had not really had much chance to meet before. I'd seen her at the APEG conference back in March, and she is from Fair4All, and she's the CEO for that. Fair4All supports financial well-being of people in vulnerable circumstances. She supports, their organisation supports credit unions, including Bradford District Credit Union. We've had a grant from them that really helped us over our COVID. Sacha has a passion for building capacity in affordable lending organisations, and it's a privilege to have you on today. Scott, I'm going to be starting with you. So, Scott, a bit of an obvious question. We've all been gripped by the election. What is Joe Biden, in your view, going to do to help credit unions in America?
Wow. Well, what a question to start off on. My friend,
Yeah.
smiling ear to ear. I can't wait to hear how I'm going to respond. First of all, happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for letting me be part of this event. Well, obviously, credit unions are consumer advocates, and so a majority, I would say, of us in the credit union space, certainly people like myself and Hank, are very hopeful with the Biden presidency, as we believe it's certainly going to be more consumer-centric. We're hopeful that there will be more funding for CDFI U.S. Treasury programs to, during this year of COVID, there have been many different recovery proposals put out, which include CDFI's funds. They never made it through and got passed. So we're hopeful with Biden and a different administration that we will see more funding. We're also hopeful to have a credit union voice at the table. Bill Bynum, CEO of Hope Federal Credit Union in the U.S., which is one of the most fantastic community development credit union examples that exist, was appointed by the Biden-Harris team as the agency review team for the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And so having that voice there, very important. So I'm hopeful, I'm looking forward to an opportunity for credit unions to shine during this next political era.
Fantastic, Scott. Now, across the US, there's something like about 5,000 credit unions, and some of those are designated as community development credit unions. Can you briefly tell us what a community development credit union is?
Yeah, right. So community development credit union is a name actually I think was coined by Inclusive, our friends at the National Credit Union, National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions, and identifies a credit union that's focused on community finance, particularly serving underserved, overlooked communities. And within the US, yes, there's about 5,200 credit unions. There's about 2,600 credit unions that's actually been identified by its regulator as specifically serving low to moderate income. So more than half of US credit unions have that designation. And then there's about 325 credit unions are actually CDFI certified credit unions like Hanks that have been designated by the US Treasury as community development financial institutions.
Fantastic, thanks for that. Now, in the UK, we call them loan sharks, you call them predator lenders. Very briefly, how prevalent are these in your communities?
Well, they're extremely prevalent, and in spite of years of attempted legislative restrictions, of course, we have online predatory lending, loan sharks. And we see it covers the range, of course, personal loans, unsecured loans, vehicle loans that many of the people that need affordable transportation are paying 40% or more for a used vehicle that may not even last a year because it's in poor condition. We see it on credit cards, really high limits on credit cards. And so it's a prevalent problem, and it really it's ironic. In the US, one of the wealthiest developed countries, right? We have one of the highest poverty rates in the world. We have incredible income polarization. And what we see, for instance, in communities of color, there was a Kinsey report this year that Black American households have 10% of the wealth as a white household, 10%. And so what happens when you look deeper, you see beyond, society issues and other issues that are there, they're trapped in payday lending cycles. They can't get out. They can't get out. And so while my family's building wealth and assets, their family is paying in high interest on a predatory loan.
Yeah, and I know Sir Hank's going to be able to tell us a little bit more about that in Detroit. Now, just finally, you look after 220 credit unions across the US. Can you pick a city that we would be familiar with? And very briefly, just tell us how you've helped them in their financial inclusion strategy.
Well, I'm going to pick Western Massachusetts, Pittsfield, which is next to Albany, New York, which is New York State capital, I believe. Credit union, Greylock Federal Credit Union, that maybe about 7 years ago decided that they have this large working class, low income community, and they had a growing minority population that really wanted to figure out how to be more financially inclusive. And so I worked with them. Of course, I shared credit union best practices like Hank's Credit Union, what can they do in their community. I've shared a lot of Hank's story with a lot of credit unions, by the way, in the U.S. And how can they reach this group? And we started with a meeting with the community. In fact, the credit union CEO wasn't even sure what I was going to ask the community practitioners. We got them all, a whole bunch in a room, 30 in a room, and I shared the credit union's mission of financial inclusion, and I shared this concept of a bridge. On the bridge, one side of the bridge are many of the people that you on this call help. They have no assets, they have poor financial skill sets, and they're being preyed upon by your loan sharks. And the other side of the bridge is this prosperity, right? Maybe they're a homeowner, but they've certainly got a savings nest egg, they've got good credit, they make good financial choices. So working with this credit union and the community, we work together to identify what are the steps across that bridge. And some of those steps are best provided for by community practitioners that are the financial counseling experts that have people coming to them and help. The credit union provided those steps of credit builder loans, small balance loans that help them build their credit score, rebuild their credit score, affordable access to credit for a vehicle or an alternative to a payday loan, financial counseling. This credit union over the last 6 years has probably added about 30 staff that are certified financial counselors. So I kind of like the fence idea, right, Ian? The credit union's got member-facing staff that when people come in, they're certified counselors, they're getting financial counseling without even knowing they're getting counseling, right? And so that led to grant funding, which I helped them get with U.S. Treasury, and then that helped with an investment from community partners to create a financial empowerment center within their community where community practitioners are there, the credit union is there, not as a branch. They don't do transactions there, but financial counselors, credit counselors from the credit union, and it's free to the public to come in. There's also other community practitioners that maybe provide help with healthcare or domestic abuse issues, and it's like this holistic community thing that the credit union is able to be there, provide real-time financial counseling, affordable credit products, because credit does play a role in asset building for many of us, but it needs to be affordable and it needs to be fair, right? Credit unions play that role. So what's the benefit? Well, it's kind of, although I don't think the rate of membership growth is as steep as yours, Ian, but phenomenal membership growth, phenomenal loan growth. Their brand and their community. I'll tell you this. I'm sure this credit union is at the top of the Rolodex for the community mayor, the leader, the council. Yeah. They know if there's a problem. When there was the pandemic hit, they called this credit union. We need emergency assistance loans for first responders, right? So we get to work with credit unions to do that, and we get to work with amazing people, community practitioners that are on this call, similar to the ones on this call that, I call it living the dream.
Scott, you and I, we've talked for hours before on Zoom. We'd love to have this discussion far more. It's worth just mentioning that the funding in the US is very different to the UK. And one of the reasons for the Anti-Poverty Events Group is that we pooled our resources to pull in more funding. And that's the way we've done that. But Scott, thank you very much. And Sacha, on to yourself. Sacha, I could see you nodding your head all the way through that because you're obviously looking at the UK side. And a lot of that would resonate. But the first thing I wanted to ask is, how many people would you say that there are financially vulnerable in the UK?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, we talk about people being in vulnerable circumstances and recognizing that actually individuals can be in that situation because of their physical or mental health, because of their financial capability, because of their financial resilience. So in the UK, we know that even going into this crisis, that some 12 million people in the UK had less than £50 in savings. Wow, another 12 million less than £500 in savings. So for an awful lot of people, a washing machine breaking down, if they're fortunate enough to have one, is actually a really significant event for them. And then also sort of life events that can happen, bereavement, etc. And then finally, in terms of financial capability, it's worth saying that within the UK, we know that 24 million people have got the numeracy skills of a 12-year-old. So all of those elements can put people into a situation where they're in vulnerable circumstances. And our estimate of that is, before COVID, 11 million people. We think that COVID has probably tipped at least another 3 million people into that category when you look at it in the round. So it's a big issue. And again, like Scott says, we're a developed, wealthy nation. Those things you look at, 2020 in the UK, really?
Yeah. So how do you see credit unions filling that gap?
Well, I think there's just this really critical point, and Scott brought this out brilliantly, is that the financial system in the UK is broadly designed for people with predictable lives, predictable incomes, who have got, significant assets. And that can work fine. You know, I'm fortunate, you know, I fit that system. I have a nice bank account. I have people texting me all sorts of things I can have. If you don't have that sort of base, then actually the mainstream doesn't work for you. You know, post 2008, most mainstream banks just completely withdrew from providing small unregulated loans. And why do we talk about loans? It's because actually credit, as Scott said, is often the pathway to people actually building sustainability. And it's also where the banks withdrawing allowed a market to develop that causes significant harm. So I think that credit unions are fantastic because actually they provide that real rooted in community place where people can access support and advice to actually make wise decisions, access small unsecured loans, and build a savings habit alongside it, which I think is absolutely critical because, you know, when people can do that, and I'm sure we'll hear from Karen as well as from you, Ian, later, just in terms of, you know, some of those things actually put people in a position where it actually really fundamentally shifts your dynamic. And I think that is really powerful. But, you know, part of the challenge is actually, you know, credit unions focused on this customer group in the UK. It's subscale, right? Yes. The opportunity, you know, in terms of the need in the marketplace, you know, we've estimated in total there's about a £7 billion need in terms of credit at the moment. As you know, as actually you look forward, where people are going to illegal or going without, right? At the moment, 3 billion of that is being provided by high-cost lenders. In the credit union sector, people focused on this particular customer group, lending to this particular customer group, we estimate is about £250 million. So it's this significant scale-up challenge that is really what we're excited about at Fair4All Finance.
And just coming on to Fair4All, because again, thank you, BDCU's had a grant for you over COVID that's really helped us, like many credit unions. So tell us about Fair4All, quickly, briefly. Where did you come from, and what are you guys up to?
So we came from, we have a scheme in the UK called the Dormant Asset Scheme, and in very simple terms, this is a mechanism whereby money that people have forgotten existed in bank accounts that haven't been touched for 15 years, 19 banks voluntarily participate. They'll do everything they can to locate the owner of the money in those accounts, and once they've exhausted that, it gets transferred into something called the Reclaim Fund. And basically, that money that people the money that people had forgot is then applied to make a difference to people for whom every pound counts. And the Act in the UK is that can be used for 3 areas: social enterprise, youth, and financial inclusion. And so after a massive amount of work in 2019, we were formally established, and I took up role of CEO in September last year, so a year in. And our job is actually to really sort of think about, well, there are amazing charities and campaigners in the UK. There are brilliant organisations, but what was needed was this catalyst to be able to really create the system change so that we can actually create an overall financial system that serves people with unpredictable lives and unpredictable incomes just as well as it does for those with predictable lives and predictable incomes.
Sacha, fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. And just finally, how do you see community partnerships working in order to increase what credit unions and organisations can do?
I think that there is just this really important thing that, you know, financial inclusion, it is a team sport, and probably the most important thing is people playing to their strengths, right? So, you know, we're not trying to duplicate the work of the Money and Pension Service on financial education. We're not trying to duplicate the work of Step Change and Citizens Advice Bureau in terms of debt advice. We're not becoming a provider ourselves. Our job is very much to identify the gaps structurally in the system and to use our funding to be able to catalyse it. And I think that that's what's really exciting, is when you sort of actually, you know, one of the things we've been doing is actually trying to evidence the social and economic value of doing this work. We did our first sort of substantive report on that earlier this year. And what we managed to demonstrate is that by providing small unregulated loans to individuals when they need them at an affordable price. Over a period of 5 years, just with one organisation had generated over £50 million worth of social value. And so that provides a great opportunity for local authorities, for housing associations, anyone who is working with people in a place to get involved with credit unions, with debt advice agencies. You know, imagine if we were all able to work together to use our multiple skills, just the impact that that could have on society. It's just really exciting, isn't it?
Sacha, that's fantastic. And just to mention, there are over 300 credit unions across the UK, and there will be one near you if you're tuning in from elsewhere. So, you know, look up your own credit union. They're great to work with. And Sacha, you've really been helpful in that. Thank you. I'll hand back to Gareth.
Thank you very much, and that was so interesting. And we're going to have an opportunity to direct some more questions at Sacha and Ian in the questions. So I'm going to turn to the flip side of this around savings and promoting savings. And we've got two international leaders joining us in the credit unions movement. We've got Hank Hubbard, who is CEO of One Detroit Credit Union. And we've also got Karen Bennett, who is the CEO of Enterprise Credit Union in Liverpool, and who is also the president of the Association of British Credit Unions. So welcome, guys. I'm going to hand over to you to kick us off. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm Hank Hubbard from One Detroit, as you said. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about Detroit. We have almost 700,000 people. At our height, we were about 2 million. So like I think a lot of industrial cities in Britain, we've had a lot of flight, and there's a lot of blight in our city, and we're 78% Black, 36% under our poverty line. So our credit union focuses on the people that have been left out of the mainstream financial systems. And in Detroit, about 50% are either unbanked or underbanked. So that's a lot of people. And our demographics reflect those of Detroit. We've got 87% are Black, 74% of our people live in low income census tracts. So there are a lot of people that are struggling income-wise. Just sort of to play off of something that Sacha said, our median savings balance for our members is about $100. So half of our members have less than $100 total savings with us. So that's a little bit of a glimpse of us. I also like to brag that we are the United States home of autos, and we're often called Motown, and we're also the home of Motown music. So we have a lot of great things going for us in Detroit. And there are a lot of great things going on in Liverpool, aren't there, Karen?
I don't know whether I can beat that, Hank, but I'll certainly try. So thanks for that, Hank. I'm going to begin by wishing both yourself and Scott, happy Thanksgiving Day, and certainly all our friends over in America as well. And thanks to Ian for inviting us here today. It's been a great opportunity to touch base with Hank again. We first met around about 7 or 8 years ago now. I was part of a group that went over to visit Hank's credit union in Detroit, and it was absolutely mind-blowing, the work that they're doing on the ground there. So great to see you, Hank, really is. So a little bit about me, I suppose, for those who don't know me. As Gareth said, my name's Karen Bennett. I'm a passionate advocate of credit unions. I'm CEO of Enterprise Credit Union based in Nowt in Liverpool, and I've been involved in credit unions now since around about 1991. I began as a volunteer in my local credit union, and I took flight and moved over to Enterprise, which was about sort of 2 miles down the road there, back in 1998. I mean, I just love my credit union and, you know, everyone involved in it. You know, I think sort of my second love in the credit union world, if you like, is ABCUL, you know, where I'm proud to say I'm the president and have been for 3 years. You know, and ABCUL, for those who don't know, we represent credit unions of all shapes and sizes all over the UK. You know, and we're the biggest and, dare I say, the best trade association in the country. But I will say that because I began by saying I'm passionate. But a little bit onto Enterprise, well, Hank's just mentioned there. So we, like Hank, we're in Nosey, we're based in one of the most deprived areas in the UK. And we operate very proudly as a community credit union. I'd say about 95% of our members have come through the community. We don't have a big payroll deduction presence within our credit union, and that's fine. And like so many other credit unions, you know, what sets us apart, we're there for our members. You know, I think our tagline in our credit union is sort of, we're there for our members throughout all their lives, and we have been in Enterprise the last 32 years. Think about the typical member, Hank, that you just mentioned there. I'd say probably a typical member in my credit union would be between the age of 25 and 40. I would say it was about 75% of our membership would be women, and they'd be young mums with kids. You know, and I'd say, to touch on what you'd said there, I'd probably say the average savings in the credit union would be around about £200 to £300 there. But so I suppose I've been reflecting as people have been talking, you know, but thinking about the similarities, I suppose, you know, we've got the same type of barriers, Hank, you know, on the mountains to climb, you know, specifically around savings, you know, when trying to get people to save, and especially those financially vulnerable out there. You know, there are so, you know, Sacha just mentioned how many financial vulnerable people are out there. You know, but sort of not sort of even just for an annual basis, but how can we sort of change people's minds in the long term? You know, how many people are being affected through this COVID that we, you know, we're sort of still living in? You know, it's certainly a barrier for us. You know, so I've seen barriers. I just sort of want to throw back to you, I suppose, Hank, and say sort of what barriers are you seeing when you're trying to encourage this? You said your average savings would be around about $100. You know, so what type of sort of barriers are you facing there?
Well, I believe that you know, having a savings is not having a savings is why it's so expensive to be poor, right? Is that you're always thrown to last minute things, which are usually the most expensive options. So we have tried to do a number of things, including actually trying to trick people into savings, but they're for the members that we serve, $25, for example, putting $25 into a savings account, they don't understand why that's worth it. You know, we don't pay interest that is high enough for them to get excited about, and you know, so why should I put it away? I can keep it in my pocket. And often it's been a very difficult thing to try and get members to do that. And we do have some products intended to do that, and but the difficulty is if they're strapped for money, taking some out of their wallet without getting a perceived value. Immediate value is a difficult thing, I think. How about you?
No, I think you'd agree. I totally agree there. I think sort of some of the other barriers I see in our membership, I think a big thing would be the education. It was sort of raising awareness. And as you said, you know, how can you attract people to save? Another barrier I see as well is sort of accessibility and ease. You know, it's okay getting someone to set up a regular savings, you know, through a benefit payment or payroll deduction or whatever. You know, but what happens in our credit union, they have a low month or they have an unexpected bill. So many people just stop saving, you know, and when we ask the members, you know, they come back to us and say, oh, I couldn't be bothered setting up another standing order or do a payroll deduction. So we're seeing people drop off like that. You know, I think another thing as well, I'm thinking about the most financially vulnerable out there. I think what you mentioned, Hank, about sort of, I think you said about $25 a month, but trying to encourage people to do that. I think certainly in what I'm seeing, to try and encourage someone within my community sort of to try and save maybe £20 a month or something like that, I think there's an element of an embarrassment factor there, where people just simply can't afford to make those regular payments.
Right.
You know, in some cases they're talking the most they can save is maybe £1 or a couple in a, you know, sort of within a month. You know, and sort of, I think we need to change that. We need to change our perception on that as well. You know, and maybe start encouraging, you know, those $10 a month or, you know, a couple of quid a month or something like that. You know, in fact, you know, when you think about it, I'm saying small scale savings. But what is small? You know, what's relevant to you and I is totally different to someone on a really low income. You know, it's relevant to that individual. You know, I really think sort of want to try and change certainly our team thinking on that, you know, and try and embrace and then absolutely encourage that moving forward. What about you, John? Do you have any of those?
I think, you know, another barrier that occurred to me while you were talking is that our members are intimidated. They don't feel like they're welcome in a bank branch, right? So when you and I met, Karen, I took you to one of our branches, which was designed specifically to try and put our members, the people that we were trying to serve, at ease, and so that they could feel respected and listened to, and not just an object like you do in banks. But you know, when I think of people getting into a financial hole, the first thing I want to tell them is to stop digging. You know, the answer is always, well, let me borrow some money. And so we do have a bunch of products that are intended to be more affordable and save money that way. Lending products. In fact, my chairman likes to say that providing fair and affordable financial services undergirds everything that we do. It's sort of like a bedrock. And to even say that is sort of funny because it seems so obvious to me. But we do have Save to Win, which is a savings raffle. As you mentioned, is $25 a month, and you get an entry to win a cash prize. That's what I mean when I say we sort of trick them, because playing the lottery here is very popular. I think some crazy amount, like 40% of our population think that winning the lottery is a good retirement plan. So if we can get them to save money instead of play the lottery, and they might win a prize, and a lot of them do. So that works. But mostly what I think has the biggest impact with our group is to provide them less expensive alternatives to the kinds of loans that Ian was talking about. We too have payday lenders like your loan sharks, and we have a product that costs about a quarter of that. And it's still a really expensive product to use, but it's saving our members about $1 million in interest every year. So
that's brilliant.
How about you? How do you get them over the barriers?
I think that's great. I think so that we have some good examples over this side of the pond as well. We have the very similar to what you just said there about the like the raffle type of thing. You know, we have a prize saver scheme launched last year. A number of credit unions taking part in that, and so that encouraging people to save £1. Just start off with £1, but that £1 goes into the pots. You know, and so that you've got a chance of winning £5,000. You know, and it's encouraging saving, and hopefully it'll be rolled out to other credit unions as well moving forward. I think so that zoning into enterprise, you know, we offer lots of savings accounts. I think we offer around about 28. You know, we offer holiday accounts, a normal savings account, Christmas savings, you name it, house deposits, goal savers, corporate accounts, so on and so forth. I was totally honest. Are the members using enough of them? No. I think sort of this past 6 months has certainly shown us that. We've seen, so many people, who, stats are showing out there that people just don't have 1 month, 2 months support around them financially to sort of weather any storm. And we've certainly been, we're all going through a storm now, and I think sort of that's been quite evident as well.
Well, Karen, I really appreciate your friendship over these years, and it's fun to see Ian, good friend, and Scott, who are also good friends. And I guess it's about our time to pass it over to Gareth.
Yeah.
Hank, that's well, in terms of timekeeping, thank you very much to both you and Karen for that. So in this final section, before we move on to some Q&As from everybody, and we just want to turn our attention to hearing Bradford and District's Anti-Poverty Events Group. So they were recently the finalists in their Council Service Excellence Awards around how they've developed this partnership and collaborative approach to staging events and initiatives that can link vulnerable people to services and information and support their financial well-being and financial inclusion. So it's this community development approach that we want to sort of focus in on now. So the slides that hopefully are going to be up in a second will show you the range, and we've seen that from Ian earlier, just the range of organisations who make up this group and the types of initiatives and events that they've staged. I'm going to bring two of the participants or representatives from the group to talk about this in a second. So we've got Kath Almeroyd from Bernardo's Stronger Families Poverty Project here in Bradford, and also Helen Johnson from Bradford Council. So we're going to talk a little bit more about two case studies that show how partnership and collaboration has made it easier to harness the expertise and talents across this group. And so I've been really lucky enough to as part of the preparation for this event tonight, to be involved in some of the discussions with the 9 organisations. And it just comes across just how passionate and actually how comfortable each of the organisations are at working together. And it's a real sort of highlighting how true partnership can deliver some amazing results. But I'm just about to introduce Helen to kick us off, but please do submit any questions that you've got through the chat facility. And again, we'll put some of those questions after the end of this session to the panel. Helen, first of all, Helen, you work for Bradford Council, and you've told us that you've done some amazing policy work around anti-poverty, and this has led you to working with Ian from the credit union. So can you just tell us a little bit how the Anti-Poverty Events Group came about, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that introduction, Gareth. Bradford Council is keen to support people who are in poverty, help people get out of it, and obviously to prevent situations that push people into it in the first place. There's loads of work goes on across the district already aimed at addressing those issues. So when I was given the role of pulling together an anti-poverty strategy, it's kind of like I was thinking, well, scratching my head, what would that be? There's so much going on already. But basically, what we focused on in that strategy was looking at how key organisations could come together and work differently to kind of fill gaps that had been missed, in the work that we were doing. So as part of my role, I came across Ian on the run-up to the Financial Inclusion Week in 2017. A partner from our faith sector had identified that service providers in the area were finding it really difficult to keep up with changes to our government's flagship welfare benefit, which is universal credit. It was making it really hard for them to provide right advice and services to support customers and people across the district. Myself and Ian, along with the anti-poverty elected member champion at the time, and our partner from the faith sector, formed a small group to look at staging a workshop where we would kind of update practitioners about the benefit and where it was at that stage. In developing that event, we pulled others in to help us. We also included other content at the event, such as around problem gambling and where people could get help about loan sharks, about reducing fuel costs. It was all aimed at practitioners and service providers. And we put the event on, and it just went down a storm with the people that came to the event, the professionals that came to the event, and they were kind of like clamouring for more. Organisations that had been at the event, such as Bernardo's, Carers Resource, CNET, had all contributed so much to that event and making it a success. When we debriefed afterwards, we decided we'd look at how the model could be used in future to promote financial inclusion and ensure that practitioners across our district and the services knew what was available locally. We liked how each organisation that had taken part had brought something unique into that event. And on a personal note, along with everything else that kind of like started off that day, I'd like to say that being part of the anti-poverty events group and staging things with partners on the ground, it's enabled me to grow my networks in that area, and also to make sure that any policy work that I do is well grounded and relevant. Just to conclude, that's how the anti-poverty events group was born.
That's amazing. Thank you, Helen. And we should have Kath from Bernardo's. So Kath, are you able to sort of tell us about how you get parents who might be struggling to get things back on track? It'd be great to hear about how your surviving summer events how they helped families in Bradford.
Absolutely. So the anti-poverty event group was very aware that the long summer holiday break for families can be an incredibly difficult time, particularly around holiday hunger, with families struggling to feed children when they weren't getting meals through school, and also not being able to have holidays and activities like other children around them. So the group came together to plan an event for Bradford and Cllr, share ideas about best practice across the district with people working with vulnerable families. To start off, we talked to parents who had lived experience of poverty, find out what was really important to them, and they shared challenges which included not eating themselves because they were feeding their children over summer, and feeling really sad that their children didn't have positive experiences and holidays to talk about when they went back to school. But the families also told us about the resilience, that they had some great ideas about how to cope and how to survive summer that they wanted to share with others. So this group of parents went on to run a workshop at the event and actually share their ideas with practitioners. The event shared some fantastic information about what was available in the Bradford District to support vulnerable families over summer. But just as importantly, it was a networking event, and some of the feedback we got was that it was fantastic for the workers to talk to each other and to be able to network and share those ideas and connect with each other. One of the quotes that brings this to life was, "I've learned more here in 10 minutes about what's available than I have in the last 10 years, which we thought kind of summed it up. The event was really well attended. We had people working with vulnerable families from a whole host of organisations, but we also had a local MP attending. We had young people on work experience, as well as the parents themselves. So it was a really, really vibrant, energised and inclusive event. I think one of the key things for us was that we did it on a shoestring. We didn't have funding or a lot of money to run Surviving Summer, but what we did have, as Helen said, is a partnership of different partners who all had resources they could bring to the table, and were really passionate about working together and making it work. And during Surviving Summer, we met other organisations, we built our networks even further. We connected with people like the big local and Cllr community-grounded organisations, and that's helped us really develop as a network. And more than anything, we then went on to kind of roll it out with road shows for families in Bradford, sharing the ideas from Surviving Summer. It was a really, really successful event, and it really did kind of bring to life the partnership and what we could achieve.
That's amazing, Kath. And what's been the impact of COVID on the work of the group? How has it changed, and what new challenges have you found being presented by families?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So at the beginning of COVID, the anti-poverty event group were all sharing similar concerns that families who were socially excluded, financially excluded, were being left behind. We saw a lot of resources going online, so support around mental health, activities for families, information about how to stay safe. A lot of it was online, and we knew that families who couldn't access computers, who didn't necessarily have literacy or have the right kit, were really missing out and being left behind. One of our partners, Artworks Creative Community, we heard from Deb at the beginning of the webinar, they had a wonderful idea called Bundles of Creativity, which was activity packs to be sent out to families, which were beautifully designed, enabled children who weren't able to get online to do some really fun, great activities and keep busy. There was also lovely ideas like a positive affirmation included, lovely positive messages of support, and also key information from local services. So the Anti-Poverty Events Group were able to kind of support Artworks in some of the kind of channels to get these bundles out across the district. We also kind of shared some of our ideas about support. Stronger Families have got all our information out across the district. There was a bundle of creativity, which I think you can see up on the screen, called Loan Sharks and Monsters, which had messages around kind of dangers of loan sharks, and with some great activities for young children to understand that. I think one of the things that's really important to kind of mention here is how the events group, in particular Artworks, were able to scale up small lots of people doing small activities for families. This was huge and is huge. The bundles are now going out to 10,000 families across the Bradford District, across Cllr and Bradford. That is a huge reach. And these are families who would be getting food bank, might not be seeing the messages around sort of COVID, around some of the kind of worries we have for families. And we're reaching them through the bundles of creativity. So Artworks Creative Communities are doing a fabulous job. And our Anti-Poverty Event Group are absolutely behind them. And it's a really, really positive thing that's happened during COVID.
It's so impressive. It's such an innovative approach to tackling this issue. So thank you, Kath. And Helen, just bringing you back in and drawing on Surviving Summer and the other events that the group staged, could you let us know how collaboration and partnership and that sort of co-production, that idea around jointly doing this together, how's that supported these events?
Well, it's entirely supported the events, and it's meant that we could put on events that as lone organisations we just wouldn't have been able to even consider. So, I mean, one of the things about the Anti-Poverty Events Group is that it's unconstituted, and that might sound, a bit odd, like, being proud of that. But what it means is that as individual organisations, we don't all have to support everything. And for instance, like, I work for the council, so there is more red tape in the council, and I hope council officers close your ears now. So if red tape gets in the way of us, kind of organising something, my red tape gets in the way, another organisation in that group will pick it up and take it over. So whilst all our parent organisations support our involvement, and you heard that from Councillor Hinchcliffe in her address, and that was heartening to hear, those organisations don't direct the work, but they do all benefit from it, and the people that they serve. So everyone and every organisation that is part of this group brings something unique to the group. So for instance, it's kind of like I've got, from an organisation point of view, when we're doing events on the ground, I have access to photocopiers and what have you that other members of the group wouldn't be able to do, because obviously the they're on much tighter budgets. An organisation within the group acts as our banker. Another organisation, an individual, is great at putting funding bids together. And the parent participants brought their experience of what works and what will help others, to the Surviving Summer events, and they produced top tips for parents, which were just based in stuff that they tried and tested. And I must say, there is a member who's a brazen networker, and through his endeavours, we reach places we never expected, such as Radio 4, BBC News website, even as far as our friends across the pond who are here with us tonight. We also, in the group, there's also a great mix of skills, talent and capacity. And it's kind of like, regardless of what somebody's actual role is in their kind of paid for job or what have you, if they're good at something and our group can use it, we'll use it. So it's kind of like people can use some of the skills they've got that they don't necessarily get to use in their own in their own normal working day.
Yeah.
And just talking about the parent participants, having those on board and having CAF support those parents to be part of Surviving Summer, their involvement in Surviving Summer made that event so powerful, and it was just a great piece of co-production. So kind of like as a whole, we work together to meet the goals from across our organisations and support people in our district. So for me, some of the actions and priorities within the anti-poverty strategy that I've got some responsibility for are directly met through this group's endeavours, such as boosting incomes and reducing costs, because we equip professionals and people with the information they need to improve financial well-being and reduce financial harm. And this work supports some of our most vulnerable people. So as Ian mentioned earlier, credit union membership has almost trebled from 3,000 members when he came on the scene and the group started to over 8,000 today. As loan organisations, I think I've already mentioned, we just wouldn't have the reach or credibility as individuals to stage some of our events, and we'd miss out on supporting services and people in this way. And understanding, I think key to the group and its success is understanding across the group that we won't all be able to support every initiative every time. This is respected, and it's a key to keeping that group rock solid. So, but having the core group together and meeting regularly means that we can plan out some of the things we want to do in advance and block time to support those things. I personally feel very privileged being part of this group. It's the best partnership and collaborative work I've ever been involved with. We'd like to do more co-producing with people, and we'll be looking at how we might do this. Hopefully participants at the webinar will have some ideas for us, and I'd absolutely love to hear from them what they're doing in their areas, and kind of like, some of the stuff that we could perhaps pick up here. So that's me finished for now. Thank you very much.
That's been really, really informative, Helen, and thanks, Kath, as well. So, I mean, I think it just resonates that actually to Sacha's really well put phrase earlier on, that it's a team event, it's a team sport. We can't individually tackle some of the challenges that we face in society around financial services and financial exclusion, that the problems are too big to be taken on individually. So this collective collaborative approach is so essential. So it's great to hear about the enthusiasm of the group and the work that it's done and the benefit that it's delivered. So it's been really, really interesting. So thank you for bringing that through. So I think we're still just about on time, which is amazing, seeing as we've had such information and breadth of discussion. So I'm going to bring back now. I think we're going to invite the other participants to join us for the Q&A section. So, hi, I can see Sacha there. That's great. Hi. Oh, good. I'm not alone. So seeing as I've got the microphone, I'm gonna get my question in first, and then we can turn to some of the questions that people have been putting in the chat. So I'm going to put this out to Sacha and Karen, and particularly those involved in the credit union movement. So I want to know from your perspective, and we'll start with Sacha maybe, how can we scale the credit unions sector here in the UK? We're about 1.2 million members, which is tiny compared to the proportions in America and other countries. So what do we need to do to expand the movement here?
I think it's a great question, Gareth, because I think that, you know, as ever when you're changing a system, there isn't just like one silver bullet that does it. But I'd sort of maybe sort of draw out that there are probably a couple of things. One is really being able to support really the investment in organisations being able to get their systems, their technology, all of that sort of things, so that it is actually possible to deliver to significantly more people in a way that doesn't increase loads of costs. So I'd sort of pick out that one, which is an area that we're working on, and Karen will be very familiar with this, so really helping organisations get a growth strategy, then develop an IT strategy, develop all of their systems and processes that actually can take you from being at a certain size really to do that step change, which is, you know, I come from a very strong business background, so that's why I bring a lot of expertise in how to do that. I think the other bit is that there is this whole thing in terms of market awareness, and in some ways I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and it's why something like this is so important, is that credit unions in the US are at a certain scale where, you know, people know about them. In the UK, it's like, you know, I think Karen, I think you said this at the ABCUL conference, it's like it's the best kept secret, and so when you've got high cost lenders who've got, you know, multi-million pound budgets to be on television the whole time, to come up #1 on your Google search, really being able to build that awareness of credit unions, I think, is probably where I'd put my you know, that sort of question. If you've got £1 and you had to invest it anywhere, that's probably where I'd start. And, you know, and frankly, that's where we can really help in putting some welly behind that in terms of market strategies, but also that wider awareness.
Brilliant. And Karen, from your perspective as a credit union here in the UK, what are your key challenges? We've had a question there.
Yeah, I think sort of echoing what Sacha said there, sort of, but to raise that awareness, you know, and obviously we do want more people involved in the credit union. You know, don't forget, comes with it as additional resources as well. I think sort of credit unions, after what Sacha said there, sort of we need that support on the infrastructure, you know, to try, you know, and build that growth. We certainly do need that. Challenges, probably because we've got lack of them. Gareth, that makes any sense? You know, yeah. So it's like, you know, how can we do that so that there's more and more collaboration going on amongst ourselves? You know, well, how can we do that in a bigger partnership space as well? So that's what I'd say.
And then Scott, from a US perspective, then looking at us over here, what would you say that are the key things that we need to do to really, you know, what I mean, increase take up of credit unions?
Well, I would absolutely agree with what has been said about technology and infrastructure, and maybe tapping into something that credit unions in the past have historically been very good at. That's grassroots efforts, right? Yeah. And in the U.S. we have this problem, and our credit unions tend to be kind of humble. And so they're not comfortable telling the community that, you know, we kick butt and take names, right? We're the key source of financial inclusion. And let me tell you a story about how we helped these members get out of poverty. So I think those credit unions, I share Hank Hubbard's stories that I've, like Karen, I've been at his shop there in Detroit, and I love to share those stories. So I think UK credit unions, if you can wrap your hands around some stories really illuminate the impact, the outcomes of what your efforts in education and awareness lead to. That would be very important. And I think, and I could be wrong here, but a sense that I have is a sense that UK credit unions are missing a part of that piece of the pie, the predatory piece of the pie. And I don't know if it's regulatory, right? But there's the payday loans, and then there's the other loans. And one of the biggest ways U.S. credit unions leverage these grant dollars or these deposits that they're bringing in is they're able to finance used vehicle loans. And I don't know that that is something that UK credit unions are doing, but I see that as a missed opportunity, because if you're paying 40% on a $10,000 US dollar vehicle, those are real big dollars, and they also have that sustainability piece where if and I know Sacha is really good with finance, and so if I if I can refinance a vehicle for a member or for a consumer that's at 40%, and I can refinance it for 12%, that is a huge savings to that member. Well, it's also a huge income generator for the credit union, right? I'm sure Karen's her team's having a difficult time finding investments these days that are more than 1%. So I think there's that missing gap. Sorry, I kind of went on long there, but I see opportunity.
Okay.
And Ian, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with what Scott was saying. People who know me, I'm not a wallflower. And one of the things that we started working with Helen and the other groups is that we recognised the local papers really wanted to get involved, and I built relationships with them and sent them thank you letters when they put something in for me, and that went to nationally. Obviously I met Julia. We had a conversation before and over the summer, and I just asked people to get involved, and the more people that do get involved, we've just been, a bit of a plug, we've just been in the Independent about half an hour before we came on today. There was a big piece in the Independent that Deborah and I got interviewed for, and that came out of the BBC piece. So I see things building on one another. If you get out into your community and you start telling them what your community, what your credit union does and what you do, your community organisation does, partner with it, get a story you can get into the local paper, use that to amplify it, and the partnerships amplify everything that we do. That was Helen's word. When she first started talking to me, she said, we need to amplify this. Let's get people on board and just get this message out. And our brand awareness, when I started nearly 5 years ago, very few people had heard of the credit union. Now you can ask a lot of people and they've heard of the credit union. They may not be members yet, but they're on that journey towards us. And that's because of the brand awareness.
Yeah, perfect. And I think we've had a question from Richard that's a topic very close to my heart at the moment, because I'm writing a research paper about payroll deduction, and it's about what government actually can do here. So anybody who'd like to sort of give a perspective on some of the key policy initiatives that could be done?
Perhaps Sacha might be able to help us out on that one.
Go on then,
Well,
Sacha, and then Karen.
I think some of the things that government have done, just in terms of the amount of work that DCMS and the Treasury have done in terms of actually, researching and getting us funded and set up has been phenomenal. I wouldn't underestimate that, and I would like to pay tribute to the guys in those departments just for their real work on it. I think probably beyond government, I think there are some things that actually the regulators can think about. There are some really interesting challenges around. One is level playing field. We've got a rise in the UK now of the buy now, pay later marketplace. Just because they fall outside the regulation, just because of how they operate. And we know already that that's tipping a lot of people into credit, and also creating issues that those lending in the regulated way, when they do affordability checks, can't always see the commitments that people have got in that space, which I think creates issues in terms of level playing field. From an advertising perspective, you know, we're already in the UK starting to have, you know, some, you know, we had the restrictions in terms of advertising on things that cause people harm and actually are in the name of consumer choice, but are actually really manipulating people in vulnerable circumstances. You know, we've seen starting to sort of address, you know, smoking, alcohol, fast food, gambling, but at the moment there's nothing there in terms of advertising on high cost credit. And if you do a Google search, you know, I think Google and Facebook, to be honest, do need to play their part. You know, they go to who pays the most to get prioritized on the page when you go in and search for credit. And I do think that they need to think really thoughtfully about how they're playing their part in society and how they're causing harm, which, as we know, is a much bigger topic as well. But those are just some of the things that I would pick out. And obviously Karen can talk to what they're already doing in terms of credit unions and their legislation, but I wanted to sort of just do some of those bigger things maybe.
Of course. Karen, and what would your wish list be in terms of government policy?
Sorry, Gareth, just briefly, I would say I'd come in on that sort of, you know, ABCUL are speaking to Treasury about the legislation, and they're certainly, you know, just to pick up on what Scott said, over in the UK, we're not allowed to go into car finance. That may be, you know, a great opportunity for some credit unions out there as well. So there are good conversations going on with Treasury there. Hopefully we will see some of them come to fruition in the near future. Regarding the payroll deduction, also the automatic payroll deduction, I'd say community credit unions have the same type of barriers where if they offer a loan and they receive child benefit, you know, from, you know, I don't know what they call it over in the States, but child benefit, we receive a lot of child benefits in. You know, I think there's a lot more partnership work and that can be done in both ways, raising the awareness with other government departments, but certainly the Treasury or legislators can do that with employers as well. I think it's a two-way street. I think sort of we need more dialogue with all the departments there.
Yeah. And I just want to bring Julia in, if that's okay. There's a question here from Terry about how we can get sort of children and young people developing good habits at an early age. And I just wanted to see if you had got any perspective about how we get that through schools and other ways of saving.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Just we were talking before about this kind of idea of trying to kind of, you know, disseminate the idea of the credit union more into society. And I think, you know, maybe that's something that credit unions could actually offer in terms of going into schools and delivering sessions on, you know, budgeting or kind of saving your pocket money, as it would be at that point. But I think there's and obviously the problem with, you know, getting publicity. I mean, Ian explained there how successful he's been in doing that, because he's a bit of a dynamo in terms of, you know, his energy and his kind of reaching out potential. But, you know, I guess when you look at, you know, more sort of methodical ways of trying to get publicity, you're talking about marketing, and then inevitably you're talking about money, which, you know, is not a kind of an area where the credit union is going to be able to compete with Wonga and people like this, for example. But I think getting as much publicity as you can, maybe going into schools, I think is a really good idea, or other youth organisations actually as well is another kind of way perhaps of looking at it. But I also think, I mean, one of the things that I was really interested in my various conversations with Ian is, I think there is that sense that, you know, for those of us who are, as Sacha talked about very eloquently before, you know, who are not in difficulties or kind of not financially excluded, we can still play our part by opening a credit union account, by actually, you know, by putting our money in to kind of support that system. And I think at this particular point in time, when the people who thankfully aren't so badly affected by the pandemic are desperate to help the people who are, that's really something that you can do. And I that was not something that I was aware of. And I think a lot of people will think, credit unions, that's great, you know, really good, but that's for people who are in trouble. It's not something that I can contribute to. So again, I think that's something that we could really raise awareness of, in terms of kind of trying to kind of, you know, bring more publicity out, if you like. But I suppose one of the things that I would perhaps just throw out there, not necessarily maybe about going into schools, but I think in terms of trying to access a wide range of people is maybe thinking about some sort of podcast, because this is absolutely the kind of thing that everybody's talking about at the moment. And, you know, I saw a podcast the other day that's called something like Logistics Are Boring. And it's made by, you know, the logistic industry to obviously describe how actually supply chains are presumably not that boring. But, you know, there is a podcast for every single thing under the sun. And maybe it's thinking about ways of kind of trying to build financial inclusion and also clever, you know, budgeting, those sorts of things into something which is wrapped up and supported by the credit union, which again can in turn raise awareness.
And Sacha, I saw your hand up. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to build on Julia's point, because I think as well as saving, you know, one of the challenges for credit unions in the UK is a lot of them have actually got pretty good savings levels, but actually they need people to borrow from them who are, you know, I guess lower risk borrowers, if you like, so that they can actually have enough income to actually be sustainable. And you know, that mix of clients, that's how financial services works, right? Is you've got a mix of people, that you've got those who absolutely will be bang on certs for paying back, and those whose circumstances may make it a little bit more precarious. And so for credit unions to have a really sustainable model, it frankly needs people like, you know, us on the call to be choosing to borrow from a credit union, maybe more than, you know, having stuff on a credit card loan. And so, you know, that's a really important way in which we can actually support credit unions to have a business model that's actually sustainable.
And Scott, what would you say in America the learning is on that point? And how do we get that diverse, balanced membership of a community-based credit union?
Yeah, to us, I mean, what we just heard from Julian and Sacha was perfect, right? I guess you guys would say brilliant, right? Exactly. Credit unions need loans. They need a loan pool that has a mix of low risk and high risk. High risk to get the yield and to help people, and then the low risk to provide that security. That's one of the reasons why I believe the missing out on those used auto loans is a huge problem for UK credit unions, because those are more sizable loans and they're secured. Now, going back to how do you share this message? And this comes up a lot in the strategic planning sessions I'm facilitating with credit union boards and management, is when you look at the next generation, and we're all looking at, right, we want to be able to attract the next generation of members and borrowers. When I look at that generation, one thing that resonates and comes through to me is that they care about social justice. They care about things that are good. They would, as Julia's point, if we shared the message, we take local deposits and reinvest it back into the local community. We're people over profits. We are good corporate citizens where we are helping the underserved. And I think if people, obviously, the six of us and many of our colleagues are on the phone on Thanksgiving, we care enough about this that we're going to donate our time. I think if we share those messages, we can, as Simon Sinek says, we can attract people who believe what we believe. And that is a growth strategy and a relevant strategy for credit unions. And that message resonates. I see it all the time in credit unions. When they get the message out, they're attracting younger people who want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
And Ian, what's your experience of bringing in partners to work with the credit union? You know, I mean, I'm particularly thinking of like the council and the what's the messages that you've used to engage the council?
Just going back a step, my background's actually community development. I've done that internationally, as well as in Bradford, run community centres. I had a stint at HSBC before I went back into community development. And 5 years ago, when I started here, one of the things that I said to the board of what I was going to do, I realized were actually community development skills. And what I've employed actually is I've just taken community development and I've applied it to credit unions and finance. And I would encourage other credit unions to start recruiting and looking to recruit from a community development pool. A lot of people that do my role have come up through the credit union, or they've come from a finance background, and you have a mismatch. We're natural networkers. We want to get out there. It doesn't matter what we're doing, we'll automatically bring people with us. We're Pied Pipers, and that's what we need in credit unions, is to start mixing in recruiting from community development pools. Take those risks, get out there, put some funding into a community development worker to do your financial inclusion. And I think you'll see some results, and we love to share as well. I mean, you get a group of community development people into a room and they're talking best practice for ages. So yeah, it's good.
Fabulous. So we've got literally 1 minute left. So I think it's probably just right to sort of close tonight's session and thank everybody for participating. So thank you to all our speakers. It's been a hugely interesting event, and thank you to Councillor Hinchcliffe, Julia, to Debs, to Scott, to Sacha, to Ian, to Hank, to Karen and Kathleen Helen for their amazing contributions. And thank you for organising the event, and particularly to ABCUL for the webinar functionality. Thank you for everybody who's participated and logged on and given their questions. I'm sure what we'll do is collaborate all those together and share those out in any of the best practices that's been posted in the chat function. We'll share. So thank you very much for your time. And I just want to also raise, before I forget, because Ian will get me at the end. There are some other. The next event is on Safer Internet Day on the 9th of February next year, and again, it's going to be a webinar function because of the current situation. So, just wanted to say once again, thank you for participating, and particularly to our US guests, thank you, and have a great rest of your Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right.